Okay, people. So I am delighted to be joined by Samuel Flueckiger, um, the director and co-writer of Unser Kind, aka Our Child. I hope I didn't butcher those pronunciations, Samuel.
No, you did not, Kevin. Perfect. Thank
Ah,
you very much for having me.
splendid. No, I really appreciate you passing through, man. Like, this is a really interesting film. I think because everyone's heard of surrogacy, but I don't think people always understand the nuances involved with it,
Mm.
right? So, what was it that made you decide to tell a story dealing with that topic?
Yeah. So, um, I personally, by profession a sociologist. I didn't go to film school, and I've always been interested in the fabrics of society and the social interactions and relationships that those fabrics are made of. And when these interactions and relationships get stigmatized or tabooed, I really get interested and my ears perk up. And when my co-writer Philippe Grob and I stumbled over an article of an Australian couple expecting twins through surrogacy in Thailand a few years back, and then they were confronted with the diagnosis that one of the children had Down syndrome, they allegedly decided to abandon that child, leaving it to the surrogate. We were so moved
Mm.
and emotionally affected by that story that we wanted to write a film about it, and that was sort of the origin of our film project. Yeah.
Right, right. I mean, it's such an interesting subject because if you think about it, right, it wasn't that long ago that we knew nothing. You know what I mean? You just knew, your wife, your girlfriend, whatever, they're pregnant.
Hmm.
And boom, the child will be born in about 9 months' time. That's all you knew. Then you then we started to get a bit more info, so we knew it's a boy or a girl.
Hmm.
Right? But it's only been really recently that you can now see any you know abnormalities with the DNA sequencing, with like the genomes, with that side of things.
Yeah.
So being able to now make a decision on termination, whether you're keeping the child, whether you're gonna give the child up, is yeah, it's an interesting thing,
Hmm.
and it's a very hot topic subject as well. So, like, were there any hesitations about telling this story or difficulties with funding because of the story you're telling?
Hmm. We obviously we had a lot of conversations within our team about these sort of complexities of the topic and the underlying topics of the film.
Mm,
Topics like infertility, unwanted childlessness, wanted childlessness, and it was a constant conversation throughout the production of the film. We discovered that when funding the film, to answer your question, we didn't um, think that there were any hurdles. So we were actually very happy to learn that Swiss funding institutions were willing to support the film, despite or because of the prohibition in Switzerland. So
mm,
in Switzerland, surrogacy is illegal,
yeah.
and you cannot pursue surrogacy, and it forces a lot of couples in Switzerland that want to pursue their dream of having a family through surrogacy. It forces them to go abroad to a country where it is legal and do it there. And yeah, those stories were the ones that really moved us when looking at the intended parents, but also when looking at the journey of the surrogate, of course. And that was an important perspective for us to also take on and to weave into our narrative.
Yeah, I was really pleased to see, like, you showed Miriam's kind of side of things in this, because I think that's something that is often forgotten about.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's one of those odd things, because even in countries where surrogacy is legal, I believe, I might be wrong, but I do believe that the birth mother can change her mind at any moment. Right? So you have that aspect. I think more people know that, but they don't know Miriam's side of things. You know, the nuances of that side of this story. So I think it was really important and heartbreaking to see that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Kevin. It was really important for us to have the surrogate's perspective in our film and make sure that we sort of have her meet the intended mother, the intended parents on an eye level. And of course, a short film like this doesn't give you too much space time-wise. Because it also still moves me, and now when we show the film, the conversations that we have, this conversation we have right now, it sort of, keeps this emotional these thoughts going, and I'm writing and researching now the continuation of this story as a feature film. So
Okay.
I would like to explore this further in a feature film, and there I realize I expected it, but I also now see it happen, is that the story of the surrogate really needs to be an equal part to the equilibrium of the narrative. On the one hand, you have the intended parents, you have the surrogate, but then, and that's also important in this whole topic, you also have the child. And sometimes it also gets forgotten that the child also has human rights, and especially in a commercial context, this is something that has to be part of the discussion.
Yeah, it's one of those awkward conversations, right? When the child is, I think it's 5 months in this story, right? I believe.
It's 5, yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I think, because at that point you can't have an abortion. I think the only way you could have an abortion is if it's the mother is at risk, right? But people still do, right? There's still things that do go on. And there is that conversation about at what point is the child a person?
Yes.
But it's, because as I mentioned earlier, right, we wouldn't know if a child has any health imperfections, any health issues, only until recently. So it's just like, there's so many kids that were born with, heart issues or, hearing, sight, just all manner of things, and have gone on to lead perfectly fine lives.
Yeah.
So it's that thing about making a decision like this, because it's just like, you don't actually know what might happen until that child is, sometimes, 10, like a teenage, like there's it all very much depends. Someone can say, oh, this might be an issue, but you just don't know. So it just makes that moment. And I feel that Lucy Wirth does a really great job of conveying emotions without having to say anything. Because it's the scene when she's talking to, they're talking to the gynecologist, and it's just like, is everything okay? Like, is everything? And you can tell that there is this issue. There's this elephant in the room, but no one's talking. You know?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Lucy she's an incredibly talented actress, also very experienced, and in theater, in cinema, and I've been extremely lucky, and I'm so grateful that I was able to work with her on this project and winning her for this role, because she really understood the complexities of this character, and she brought so much to the role that I, as a male author and filmmaker, could not have brought to the role, right? So it was really a collaborative experience, and the script also gained so much from the conversations that I had with her, that I had also with Jürg Plüss, who plays the intended father, and of course with Gano Gerliani, who plays Mariam, the surrogate. Like, all of these conversations brought so much more authenticity also to the project. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Okay. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to get to that at some point, because yourself and Philippe, right? You wrote this,
Yes.
but you're males, right?
Yes.
So it's just like, and it's not to say, right? You can get stories about women written by men. You can get stories about men written by women that are ridiculously nuanced and really touch upon all the factors and facets of what makes the person so well, right? But I think it is useful to have the ear of, a person, a group, a gender, when sometimes writing certain stories. So yeah, so it's nice to know that you were able to use your cast to really be able
Kevin,
to.
I think I lost you there for a moment. Apologies.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, I was just saying, it's great to hear that you were able to utilize the cast to drill down into the story and really get it to where you're able to tell this wonderful tale. Like, how much of how many changes would you kind of think you made to the script?
I think what you're touching upon is the very essence of filmmaking for me. That it is a collaborative experience, and as a man who co-wrote and directed this story, it was absolutely crucial to me to question myself, my intentions, but also to constantly check whether the authenticity that is such an important principle for making a film like this is intact. And working with Lucy Wirth, working with Gano Gerliani, but also working with Jürg Plüss, who is a dad himself, working with Gabriela Betschart, our director of photography. She was an absolute essential sparring partner for me to see if our story is authentic, if it feels authentic, if the dialogues are authentic, and I have to mention here, Gabriela shot a documentary about surrogacy in India years back, which was she's such an expert, not only in cinematography, but also in the topic. And having conversations with her in advance, having conversations with Lucy, with Gano, with Jürg, there were countless changes and additions and nuances that were added to the script. So I couldn't give you a number, but it was a very fluent and very important process, which I think is very important for a film like that. That you're not simply, you write something, you do your research, and then you're sort of insisting that this is the film now. No, you have to really be open so it can stay organic and develop, and only then you will be able to achieve a film that truly feels authentic.
No, definitely. But how long do you think? Actually, let me rephrase. I mean, that's a very important mindset to have, right? Now, did you always like getting into filmmaking? Did you always have that mindset? Like, what did you hear another director talk about it or writer talk about that kind of approach that made you kind of want to bring that on, or is it life experience? Because not everyone does. Right? Some people, and you can see a film like this, and like people may be, fully against, let's say, abortion. So the story would be written with no mention of, right? Like there's no mention of this other thing. So the story is just very one track, right? It doesn't explore all the possibilities and the conversations that could be had in this process. So I think when you open yourself up to other voices, other possibilities, you enrich something. But it's just, as I said, not everyone has that mindset. So, what was that evolution like for you as a storyteller?
Yeah, I started making shorts. It's a while back now. Before that, I did music videos. But regardless of what story it is or what you're shooting, you are part of a collective of people who come together to tell that story. And you realize that even though you might be writing something or directing something, every time you share it and you have a conversation about it, it just becomes better. Even there might not be a conclusion that we need to change it that way, but each conversation you're having, you're taking that with on your journey, and it sort of consciously or subconsciously influences your next decisions, and you feel more confident making those decisions. And filmmaking is about making decisions ultimately, especially when shooting. And it just never felt correct to me to simply claim that I have all the answers. And because there are directors out there, at least a few, that bring a certain amount of genius to the process, and they somehow found a way to just rely on their voice, and everybody is following that voice, and it turns out to be a successful, great film. But it never worked for me that way. Maybe I'm just a different kind of storyteller and also human being. I enjoy the collaborative process, and I always discovered this basically from my first thing that I shot, like my first music video, my first short film. It was just a collaborative experience that made it not only a great experience and a more rich experience, but also a more sort of value. It made the outcome more authentic, believable, emotional. You're bringing that whole human side from all your collaborators into the project, and they also really appreciate that, because regardless of what position in the filmmaking sort of technical process we're talking about, everybody has their own story. Everybody decides to join that project for a specific reason, and it's just smart to listen to those voices, because everybody has great ideas, and if you're not allowing those ideas into the process, you're ultimately losing something. That's at least my belief.
No, I think that's true. And I think like that approach also like helps embed a project in all those people involved, right? So then they become, even more proud of it, right? Because oftentimes like you might see a short film and none of the cast have that short film on their social media. Right, they'll just have the big feature films on there, but no shorts. And these people have made a lot of short films, right? But they don't talk about the short films. But then you see other casts and the way they talk about the projects they work on, right? They just feel there's this connectiveness about it all. And then when you hear them talk about it, there was this collaborative approach. So I think there is, you know, an importance of that. And as I said, it just helps enrich that story. And we do get a very rich and nuanced story here.
Thank you. Yeah, it, like I, alluded to before, it's the conversations that in preparation that really make it possible also to, and the trust. I think trust is also a very important sort of part of a collaborative experience like this, especially when talking about such complex issues. And I think because we were all emotionally invested into the story and into the project, it was really emotional also to shoot the film. So we were at times, I'm actually getting emotional thinking about it now, because it was a wonderful experience to shoot that film in Georgia and in Switzerland. There were moments at times where this person almost, got emotional, or I got emotional behind the monitor, and we were having conversations about why that is, and it just brought us together. So it was a very short and intense shoot, and it always is, but it felt like we are a bit of a family making this film, and that's just a beautiful thing in itself. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I can only imagine, man. It's I think watching this, it is a short film, right? So it's just about 20 minutes, right? If I believe correctly. There is a lot you get from this without words, right? Like at the beginning when we see Hannah and Michael arrive at the hotel, and then Anna takes her jumper off, and you're like, wait, hold on a second. But then you realize, oh, right, it's not legal, right? It can't be legal. So you're doing this thing to hide. And then you just think about what that entails, right? So every few weeks, every month, you must have to get a bigger thing, right? To kind of help show this. And then even once you've had supposedly the baby, you can't then just go on to no bump, right? Because you've got to show like the weight, you're now it's going through the process of losing the weight. And so it's just like all of this, right? Like what does that do to a person, having to go through this thing constantly, be on edge, to be like, I can't let anyone know, because like what would be the ramifications if Hannah and Michael were discovered in what they're doing, right? So you're thinking about all of this, but it's not said, but you get it just from those few, seconds at the start of the film. Like, when writing this story, did you think about the before and the after of, where we are and where we end, and then the potential consequences to all of these events that we see?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of work finding the entry point and sort of the ending of the story, because it is a very long and strenuous journey for the intended parent couple. Like there is a lot of chapters in this story before the film starts. That is also very true for Mariam, the surrogate, right? So, yes. And it was sometimes difficult also choosing which of those moments we are able to bring to the film, but ultimately we then trusted, and I'm glad it worked for you, the power of these images and these metaphoric power of these images, of seeing that fake baby belly in the hands of the intended mother, and the audience then sort of having to reflect on what she must have been going through to get to the point where she wants to, where she's not able or willing to tell her environment that she's not pregnant, but she's getting help from a surrogate, right? These social pressures, all of those things playing into this. And at the same time, her, later there's a scene where she gives a gift to the surrogate, a cell phone, right? Because she's really like trying to connect with that person, and it's an honest intention of her to connect with her. At the same time, she wants to maybe also check a little bit on her. How is it going? Or is everything going? All of those questions that she has when she's so far away from her. And I'm glad that this worked for you. And it was important to let those images speak and not try to verbalize everything, right? Because if you're trying to verbalize everything in dialogue, not only it becomes very sort of a long piece, and it might be difficult to listen to everything. It also takes away some of that reflection that we wanted to ask the audience to have, to reflect themselves on what the journeys of these characters might have been and will be once the film ends, which I think is also an important part of it. Without giving away too much of the film where it ends, it's like it's not a conclusive end in that sense. It sends you on a journey with those characters, and you hopefully keep thinking about them. Yeah.
Well, yes, I mean, man, there's like so much to say right now, right? Because I mean, firstly, we have the bit when Michael and Hannah, come to see Miriam, and there's that hesitancy, right?
Yes.
Like you can feel it's like a reintroduction, but you're not quite sure what's happened. And then, just through a few words and stuff, you kind of get the gist of things. So that's very powerful, because it's just like, is it okay if I sit there? Right? Or just the way Miriam moves things to kind of clear a space for Hannah. And then Michael is seeing, just like, oh, can I? And it's just like there's a tenderness, a hesitancy, which is so palpable with that scene right there, which just hits you. And then, as you said, the end of the film, because I mean, there's so much, right? There's so much of everyone's journey that then must happen, which is just like, oh shit, like what happens now? What happens for these people? Where do you go? Right? And it's one of those films that I can imagine people leave the screening and just go, fuck, like what would we do in that situation? Like how would you handle that? You know what I mean? Like how do you go back to life, right? How do you, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's all you can really say without giving, but yeah, there's just a lot. There's a lot. Like, was that always the ending?
Yes, it was, even though I have to admit that it was until the very last moments where these decisions could be made, like literally when we were shooting, and even in the edit, where you're sometimes thinking, are we missing something? Do we have to maybe reshoot, even though that's very difficult for a short film? Even then, like we were having these conversations and thoughts, did we find the right ending for the story? And that's why it means so much. What you're saying, Kevin, is that it worked for you in that way, because that was the intention, to really leave the audience with the question, like, what would I do in this situation now? And therefore making the audience reflect on the underlying topics, and maybe form an opinion of themselves, bringing that opinion to a constructive debate, even political debate. So that was very important for us to achieve that. And I think when we wrote the ending, we were hoping that leaving it the way it ends would then invite the audience to have these thoughts and to keep thinking about the underlying issues. And that was it was sometimes when you think about these conventions of film, right? So that was tricky, because you are sometimes, I have to stay with my main character, and I have to find an arc. Even in a short film, there needs to be plot points, and it needs to end a certain way. And we are in a way defying that a little bit, and it needed a lot of trust in the images we talked about. They need a lot of trust in the story itself, and the power of these emotions, that it would work, that we're manipulating that rule set a little bit, and I'm really, really grateful to hear that it worked for you that way.
Yeah, no, definitely, because it's just so provocative. Because, as I said, like at the beginning of the film, when we see Hannah and Michael, right? Then at the end of the film, you think back to the beginning, and then what must happen now? Because of the illegality of the thing.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not just a clear, okay, we just do this. There's all this stuff that must now happen. But then you think of the emotional turmoil of these things, like the impact of these things.
Yeah.
But it's not just one-sided, because we have like all these different players in this piece. So it's just like, okay, so what happens with these people? What happens with these people? What happens with these people? There's a lot that you are then, just contemplating. And it's just, it's a lot. Like it's a lot. It's not a film that I feel you just watch and then you're like, right, now I'm gonna go shopping. Right? It's something that's gonna sit with you for a while.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. It was always the intention with this film, but also with my previous films, to make to tell a story that contributes to an important social debate and conversation. And in this case, with Switzerland having a complete prohibition of surrogacy, which is now ongoing for 21 years. Apologies, more than 20 years. Since 2001, it is federally banned, officially banned. I feel it's just important, looking at trends like rising rates in infertility and unwanted childlessness, to have that conversation to keep it ongoing, and not simply look away and letting couples figure it out on their own in secrecy and private, and then they have to travel abroad and do it there somewhere, and thereby participating maybe in a commercial sort of a commercial setup that might even be problematic, because the surrogates might be exploited, because the child might never learn where it's coming from, all of those difficulties. So I feel like in Switzerland, I'm speaking for Switzerland, but this is a situation in many Western countries. I feel like it should be an ongoing conversation, at least.
Yeah. Like, is there a particular reason or ground for it being illegal in Switzerland? Do you know?
Yeah, so it is, the prohibition in Switzerland is sort of based on certain ethical, moral concerns. It's based on certain legal concerns, and also some social sort of, the social sort of the cultural situation in Switzerland. So the ethical concerns mainly are around exploitation risks, like exploitation of surrogates, especially in the commercial sort of. In a commercial kind of situation
Yeah.
of surrogacy. Their legal concerns, I'm not a lawyer, so I cannot really explain
Yeah.
legal details, but let's just say that it is very complex to figure out legally who is the mother now in a situation like this, who is the father, and all of those sort of legal issues. And then it's also culturally, Switzerland is, and so are other Western countries who have banned surrogacy. Lots of the legal principles are still based on very sort of old conservative ideas of family and
Yeah.
of what it means to be a parent, and who should be a parent and who shouldn't be parents. Like these ideas of family that are sort of the foundation of these laws, they are old and they're not up to the current cultural understanding of things. So I feel like, coming back to why it's important to keep having this conversation, is prohibition the right way? That it's just important that we're not sort of burying that conversation. And hopefully our film can be a reminder that it's important to have the conversation, and even maybe be a catalyst for change in countries like Switzerland.
Yeah. I mean, it's always like, it's an odd one, really, because when you're banning something, because we don't want, it to, like, these illegal things to happen. What do you think happens when something is illegal? Right? It goes underground. It's black market. And we've seen it time and time again. Like, look, even if you only had alcohol prohibition in the States as a example, that's a hell of an example. Just all the things that happen. Like, it basically underpinned the mafia and just all the mobs and all of that kind of thing. Right? We know this. We know it's a big thing with drugs, right? When, just something like weed is illegal. That has underpinned like Mexican cartels, like Romanian drug lords, Russian drug, like so many illegal groups. We know this. This is facts. This isn't made up. This isn't hyperbole. So it's kind of like banning surrogacy. Where do you think people are going? Like, that's the odd thing about it. It's just, and it's something that you do think about again watching this film, and where Miriam is. You're like, is this a legal clinic? Like, are people here by choice? Right? Because it doesn't look like grimy or untoward. It's not lavish, right? The rooms are small, it's basic, but it's clean and it seems on the up and up, but there are always those lingering questions. And especially as we get into the film, right? There's things that you are questioning and wondering,
Yeah.
Like,
No, I'm glad. You picked up on also the way the clinic, how everything looks and feels, because it was important for us to not portray the clinic as a sort of, like you said, a grimy space where everything is sketchy. And because often, and that's what I learned in our research, it's often that these surrogates are doing this not because, I mean, they're doing it to pursue a dream of their own,
Yes.
like, you know,
Yeah.
and that is just very important to keep in mind when we're talking about commercial surrogacy, is that there is a transaction, there is a payment, and this, you know, this payment might be even life-changing. It might be a big amount of money, but it's still something that we here in Switzerland, when, you know, that we can afford quite easily, like education, for example, right? So there is this very interesting and complex power relationship as well between those two sides, the surrogate and the intended parents, when you look at it from that side, right? And it's often not just black and white, you know, like it's very like you say, grimy in this clinic, and it's like an exploitative situation. It's not like that. It is clean, and it is medically advanced, and it is you know, in most cases safe, but there's still this this situation where there's an economic transaction, and maybe the surrogate wouldn't do it if they had a different situation that they could grow up in, that they could get socialized in, if, you know, if they had more opportunities. So that's also an important aspect of this topic, especially when you look at commercial surrogacy.
Yeah, because you do think to yourself, do the women that do this understand all the ramifications of it? Right? Because some people, they do it several times, right? But that does have a toll on the body, right? There could be a point when, you know, now they've got this money, right? Which is great. So now they can do the thing they're trying to do, whether it's move somewhere, you know, to a different country, or just a different part of the country they're in, you know, improve their life, right? But now they might be like, well, now we're in this good place, we can think about having our own family. But after doing surrogacy several times, can they? Right? Is that now an option to them? But so there's all of these different things that you wonder about, and especially when it's illegal, there's no health insurance, there's no, you know, no like checks and balances in place, right? So you can get good places that these people can go and be in, but then there's, imagine, a whole heap of like dodgy, just, you know, unhygienic, unreliable places that are putting their lives at risk. So it is this roller coaster that the law creates for a lot of women in impoverished situations.
What I actually did not so much encounter the situation where, you know, the clinic was really sketchy, at least in our research. It was because a lot of it is the package for the intended parents is a very glossy one, even though it might be much more affordable in a country like Georgia than it would be in the US, for example. But it's all about obviously offering the intended parents a feeling of trust, a feeling of safety, a feeling of you're welcome, and it's fair to the surrogate, and all of these things are part of the offering, right? And that also invites couples to take that strenuous journey on, to go to another country and do this, right? So, but sometimes that's also what we saw in our research, is that the surrogates are a little bit on the sideline of all these decisions that are being made, and not always the main consideration when it comes to making that journey successful of having a child, right? And in our film, things unfold and happen that really put that, you know, to the extreme in a way, and that it was important for us to show that, to really show the moral complexities of commercial surrogacy, which then hopefully leads the audience to reflect on, is prohibition at home the right thing, or is maybe an altruistic version of surrogacy a step forward away from complete prohibition, because it would allow for certain situations, at least at home, for it to be legal without the risk of financial exploitation or exploitation per se. So hopefully these choices that we made lead to that sort of thought process.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. I mean, telling these type of stories, Samuel, like, they're very weighty, right? There's this emotional impact to them. So what does that do to you? Like, how does that impact you? Because I can imagine you can't jump from like one story to the next story to the next. Like, you might need a little gap in between this. You know what I mean? Like conversations with people just to kind of detox, as it were, from this emotional weight that comes with it.
Yeah, I think for me personally, it is more I personally don't feel able to jump on the next project in parallel or right away, because it just absorbs me emotionally, but also intellectually so much that I don't think I'm able to really pursue a similarly complex topic at the same time. But I still feel so connected to these characters and to the experience we had of shooting this, that I want to do more with it. And so that's why I'm working on a longer version of this as well. It's like it keeps me just going. And I think the feeling of maybe being a bit exhausted by it is more the actual process of the filmmaking itself, because it's such an intense work, and it has an impact on your personal life as well. Of course, it's like, it takes a lot of effort emotionally, but also time-wise, of course, to make a film, which it can be a very beautiful thing, but it's hard to sort of, and I admire filmmakers who can do this, where they are like, like they have three things at the same time going, and they manage somehow to do all of them well, even though I sometimes question if not one of the things would even be better if they were to just focus on one thing, right? But it's just that's individual to each filmmaker, of course. I just personally feel like I can only focus on this right now, and then the pressure starts building at some point again to do the next thing, because obviously you need to, you want to and need to continue your journey as a storyteller, and you need to find that next story at some point.
Yeah. Like with thinking about expanding this story, do you know like the aspects you wish to add to it? Is it more stuff at the beginning, like after the end point of this short? Like can you see what you want to add as of right now, or are you still in that process?
I do have an ending for this story, and I think it is sort of a very emotional, powerful ending that also still makes you reflect on the underlying issues that we have now been discussing, but also while being I think a good ending for a longer format film. But and yes, I do have a desire to tell more of the backstory, or the first few chapters of this story that we tell in the short Unser Kind. And the feature film obviously offers that space, right? So while I do think it works in the short that these elements are in there somehow, in the nuances and between the lines, and hopefully you pick up on some of them, it can be valuable to also use the space of a feature film to really show certain things, like why is this person making that decision? Why is Hannah, pretending with that fake belly, or why is Mariam doing this in the first place? And I think it can lead to a greater understanding of those very emotional journeys, and when you show those things that maybe not have had space in our short, but might find space in the feature version.
Yeah. There's things that you wonder, right? Like, why, when it's this kind of situation, when it's illegal, why go through this? Why not look at maybe adoption, as an approach? And then it's just like, why Georgia? Right? Like, were there any other countries in consideration? Is it a cost thing, or was it after looking at all of these places, that was literally the best place? There's a lot of things that you kind of wonder,
Yeah.
but yeah, when you're dealing with a short amount of time, this does capture so much of the emotional journey involved and the impact on all of these people's lives, which is really, really good. And you also then just, although the clinic is, as I said, it looks legit, it feels legit, there is still this transactional nature to it, which is rather cold and formulaic.
Yeah. I think, well, to answer, I think that's a very important thing also to talk about. It's like, how do we decide where we're going with this story? Because there is a bunch of choices you can make there. Like, where is the story set? There is Swiss couples going to the US to do this, where it is just much more expensive, right? And in Georgia, it is a fraction of the cost that it would be in the US. So, and that's an important aspect of the topic, is the affordability for certain intended parent couples who might not have the funds to go to the US and spend $150,000, but maybe 50,000 is something they could somehow afford by scratching all the savings together and all of that, right? And then I think when we originally set out to make this film, we were actually planning on shooting this in the Ukraine, and we were already in Kyiv, working with our co-producer on finding locations and assembling our cast and crew. When we went back and did our last few funding rounds, and then Russia invaded Ukraine and started the war, and we were forced to find a new location. And Georgia, actually our Ukrainian co-producer, Dmitry Sukhanov, he was able, despite everything unfolding, he was able to stay on the project and facilitated for us the shoot in Georgia, which is, I'm really grateful for, that he did that and could stay on the project. And Georgia sort of now also becomes, this is my understanding from our research, sort of the new destination where it is legal to do surrogacy. Before, Ukraine was not an option to do that anymore. So yeah, it was a long journey of making this film, and finding the city where we shoot this in was also, a long process.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think in the 90s, right, like Romania, if I believe correctly, was a hotspot for this kind of thing. So it's interesting how it changes.
So was India, for example, and where Gabriela, our DP, I mean, that film, I can only recommend it. It's called Mana Sapna. I'm not sure if I say correctly, but it's a mother's dream in English. Mana Sapna, a mother's dream. It's such a beautifully made documentary, and India has since changed the law, and it's not that destination anymore that it used to be when this film was shot, but still it shows so many. It shows a lot of those complexities that we tried to also bring to our story, right? And actually, it was an inspiration in itself, that film for our story, and that led me to ask Gabriela if she wants to join our project, which then would, if I could win her over to participate and collaborate with me, it would give me also a certain confidence to tell that story as a man, as a, as somebody who hasn't done surrogacy himself, right? So she I want to highlight that how valuable that collaboration was, and how much authenticity she brought to the project.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it definitely paid off, right? Because, a little birdie tells me, Samuel, that you won Best of Film at the LA Shorts Festival, which must have felt, just tremendous to, achieve that.
It honestly, it's sometimes when I think about it, I still really can't really believe it, because that is such a wonderful festival. The best, the Los Angeles LA Shorts is one of those great festivals in the US, and in the short film world is one of the most important ones. And being invited to to screen the film there was already an honor. And then learning that we won this prestigious award obviously means the world to us. And I'm really, really grateful for that recognition.
Yeah, because you're now qualified for the 2025 Oscars, right?
Yes, it is this award, the Best of Fest award. It qualifies you to be considered for the live action category of the Academy Awards. Yes.
So are you getting your tux measured and
Well,
you know what I mean?
no, we're really we really enjoy this journey now that we're on in broadening our audience and sharing the film. Not only in Switzerland but also in the US and all over the world. Frankly, I was just in Cyprus, which was also amazing, at the International Short Film Festival of Cyprus, where our film was the closing film.
Okay.
And it was a packed cinema and wonderful other films. Like, I want to say that as well. This is part of that honor that I feel with LA Shorts, but also with the Short Film Festival in Cyprus. Is like there's so many great films out there, and being part of one of those amongst those films is fantastic. And to see how they play off of each other, and how programmers put them together because they see a narrative or a red thread along them. It's just a wonderful experience. And our film was the last of the festival. The cinema was packed, and honestly, that experience of just seeing the film with the audience and hearing them react to it, and sort of getting a sense that it triggered something with them, and maybe the willingness to think about it more and to contribute to that important discussion we mentioned before. Like, that is so satisfying, and so it makes me emotional talking about it, because that is why we're doing this in the first place, right? I think filmmakers, as filmmakers, we sometimes tend to forget that we're actually doing this for the process of shooting a film, but also, of course, then just to enjoy it with the work, with the audience, and we're not it's not we're not defined by how many awards or what we sort of gain materialistically out of making films, but those are the real moments that are so valuable and give you so much back to then maybe go on the journey of telling your next story.
Yeah, definitely. Because awards are they're an odd thing, I find, right? Because when you look at the Oscars, let's
Mm,
say, you've got best film, best director, best writer, best actor, actress, all of these things, cinematographer, editor, which when you think about it, it doesn't really make sense, because if you won best director, then you should really get best film, right? But it doesn't always work like that,
mm,
and also, if you're behind if a big studio is behind you, they're able to put on this big kind of process of pushing the film out there, and get like talking to the committees and everything.
mm,
When if you've got a small indie film, you can't do that, which could potentially impact your chances of winning an award. So there's all of this kind of that goes on that kind of takes away from the storytelling, the process itself. But then you see the value in it, because winning that Oscar would then be so helpful in financing your next project, right? And getting eyes on your next project and all of those things. So it's that kind of, yeah, it's an odd kind of ecosystem. Like, how do you view it? What does it mean to you as a filmmaker?
well, I want to say that with being qualified with this film to be considered for an Academy Award, I mean, that is a huge honor, and I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity, because it is ultimately helping us, find our audience, expanding our audience. And obviously, if you are able to proceed on that journey and you make it, you make it to a nomination or even win the Oscar, it's not only in the film world, it's the greatest honor that a filmmaker can dream of. It, like you say, it gives you the possibility to really make sure that that audience grows even more. And of course, it also helps everybody involved to make sure that they can go on the next project and find that next project. And that is an incredibly helpful thing. I find it actually, with the Oscars, very good to see how the Academy, that is my understanding, has grown all over the world, and films make it into the race that would not have made it into the race maybe 10 years ago, right? So,
Mm.
and I really appreciate every year when I see these smaller films getting that shot, that chance to be nominated in the foreign language category, but also in the shorts category, but now lately also in the best picture
Yeah.
category. Of course, there is still more room for that, and there should be, the maximum amount of room for films from all over the world. But I think it's been more and more. It's been really great to see what kind of films make it in there. Yeah, so it's going to be like very, very exciting to see how that journey unfolds, and I'm super excited about it.
Mm, mm. Like, yeah, when will you find out, like
It's
everything?
yeah, it's the so this is the to be considered for to be qualified for consideration means that we are on a longer list of films from other festivals where awards are given out that are qualifying. And then on December 17th, this longer list will be cut down to a shorter list of 15 films. So that's on December 17th, yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. So not too long, but it must feel like an eternity when you're waiting for that news.
Well, we're using the time to keep working on our film and to keep working on sharing it, and yeah. So, but yes, time flies fast. I mean, and we're all excited for that day, of course. Yeah.
Do you think this will help in maybe getting the film in front of the legislate, right? To have certain conversations, to get people thinking about the legalities of surrogacy in Switzerland?
Yes, I think that's where it would be so incredibly valuable and helpful to to be considered for an Academy Award. I'm speaking for Switzerland, where this recognition is, of course, also very valued, and it would get some attention, I would say, in the media as well, where then you have a platform to share the film, to talk about the film and its underlying issues. So yeah, that would be, I think that would be an important step in encouraging this debate that I think currently in Switzerland is absent, and to help break those taboos and those stigmas that are coming with those underlying issues.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting times. Interesting times indeed, Samuel.
Yes.
Oh, one thing that I did want to ask you,
Mm-hmm.
what is the writing process like with Philippe?
Mm-hmm.
Like how was that for you?
It was a wonderful experience. And Philippe and I are dear friends, and we sort of, he originally came to me with the idea of making to tell this story, and we, when we looked at these articles, I mentioned one before in our conversation, we really both were, sort of enthralled by, by these type of stories. And when we saw that there is Swiss couples going on a journey like this, and when we read of the journeys of the surrogates, we were both very captivated. It was the pandemic, so it's one of those writing stories where we actually also had the space, being at home, the time and space to really collaborate on this very intensely, and advance the writing in a very sort of efficient way. But it was then, of course, what I mentioned before with the war breaking out in Ukraine, but also us just trying to finance the film, that it took quite a while until we were able to actually shoot it, as with many films is the case, right? Where you're just trying to get the funding, and ultimately, looking back now, it is a journey of 5 years, I would say, from the first sort of page of writing or the first exchange I had with Philippe, but to this point where we are now.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about like the time it can take to get something like this all together, and then people just judge those 20 minutes on the screen, right? They don't think about everything else that was involved in it all.
It's but I think, yes, I mean, if you're watching movies yourself, you sometimes, maybe you are just enjoying a movie and you forget hard work went into that film, even maybe if it's not something that you particularly liked or not, but whatever your experience with a specific film might be, I really appreciate that thought, because it is important, I think, to underline the amount of emotion and also the exposure of oneself that is part of making a film. And I'm thinking mainly of the wonderful actors in our film that gave so much, that entrusted me with that responsibility of telling that story, but then they are the ones in front of the camera and exposing themselves emotionally, physically at times, going to places that are truly emotional and difficult to go to, and that is hard work. Yes, and I think I appreciate it so much, Kevin, that you are considering that, and that we have this conversation about the craft as well, and then the amount of time and energy that goes into making a film like this. Because yes, it sometimes does get forgotten how much goes into a short film or even a feature film.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's all of that, but then also with something like this, and the topic that you're dealing with, like yourself, Philip, Gabriella, the cast, there's different ramifications as well, right? Because you have the people that are stringently against, surrogacy, who could be like, how dare you tell this story? How dare you play that role? That you also have to kind of, deal with and understand it is there. Yeah. And a lot of times, threats online, they're not really anything. You know what I mean? They don't really, someone go, I'm going to kill you. Right. But you're not. It's just things people say, but it's still an emotional burden. It's still an emotional impact that you do have to deal with if you see the comments, if you engage with that side of things. So there are all of these tolls that do weigh down on storytellers, right, for telling certain stories. So I think it's it's really important to let you have platforms to be able to talk about it, to talk about that process of why you chose to tell this story, like what went into telling this story, because I think that's important, it's powerful, and it can really influence not just people, right? Not just emotions, but also legislation, and cultural impact. So I think it's, great that you told this story, man.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that, Kevin. Yeah, I do.
No worries at all, man. No worries at all. Like, do you have any more festivals coming up, or do you have like a distribution on the film or any? Because I know that sometimes when films do qualify for Oscar selection, that they, oh my days, I've forgotten the platform. There's a streaming platform that oftentimes shows the shorts. Like, have you got any of those things? How can people see your film, Samuel?
I really appreciate that question. I think festivals are the first thing I want to address quickly, and that is, I think, right now the best way of experiencing the film. So next festival we're traveling to is in Mallorca, Spain, and then Italy, Sulmona, a short film festival, or a well-established film festival there that I'm really grateful that they took on the film. So in Italy, in Mallorca, and then I just want to quickly give a shout out to, our production company Film Cabaret and our producers Nadine Lüchinger and Flavio Gerbo, who are constantly fighting for this film to expand the audience and that means so much, because ultimately they were also the ones who made this possible in the first place, and they were able to really bring on board very fantastic partners also in terms of distribution. So we're working with What Media from Canada, who are doing a fantastic job at finding those platforms and broadcasters and where we can then hopefully show our film and even expand our audience more. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, no, that's great. I'll ensure to put the information on the website, so people make sure you go check that out, so you'll be able to watch Samuel's new film, Unser Kind, aka Our Child. And it's something that will definitely sit with you. So be mindful of that, right? Give yourself enough time to breathe afterwards and ingest this story, because it's a powerful one. It's a powerful one for sure. I mean, is there and like, what do you think the potential timeline for the longer version of this may be?
In an ideal world, obviously it would work all out with funding and all of that, but even then it is a long journey to make a film, especially a feature film. It would be my first feature film, so I've only done short so far, and just to be realistic and drawing from the experiences of making short films, it is going to be a couple of years until that film would be made. But on paper, it will exist in the near future. I'm currently working on it, writing it, and then having a screenplay is already a great first step. It's a first manifestation of a film, and I think it's a very valuable, or it's a great first stage to reach, right, where the film is made in a specific form. It's not visualized yet, but it exists on paper, and that's the next step. And then hopefully it will be it will be made, and we find the funding for it.
Tremendous, man. I'm definitely looking forward to it, and what other things you do next, Samuel. I cannot wait. But could you do me a big favor though?
Yes, of course.
Big favor, man. Like, I've got bad eyesight and subtitles are very difficult. But if we could get a solid background behind the text, that would be tremendous.
Yes, a solid background behind the subtitle text.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's a very important feedback, Kevin. I will definitely pass that on, and we can make that happen. Yeah.
Super. But I have really enjoyed this conversation, and like, just the insight that you've been able to expose to us on what went into making this film, why you decided to make this film, right? Just all the nuances and everything, because watching it is so powerful, right? There is like such an impact. So it was just tremendous to find out how it all came to be. So thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, Kevin. This was a real pleasure.
No worries, man. And my fingers will be crossed for the 17th of December. I hope that you get that great news.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Let people know how they can keep track of everything you do, man.
Yes, so you can follow us on Instagram if you look for Unser Kind, or Our Child even, but Unser Kind is the way to go to search for it, and then you will find us on Instagram. There you can always get the latest news, where is the next festival, where the film is playing, where you can see it, and obviously if there then will be a platform that shows it. I personally am also on Instagram, just my name, Sam, not Samuel, Sam, and then my last name, Flueckiger, which is a bit tricky to spell, but you can see it here maybe on screen with the UE instead of the umlaut, Swiss German umlaut. It's a very Swiss name to have and a bit tricky to get on Instagram, but you'll find me.
The links to the Instagram, the Facebook, to Samuel's Instagram, they will all be on the website, people. So make sure you go check them out. Follow Samuel, follow the film, because yeah, you will want this in your life, because it's a great story. It's a great story, my friend. So yeah, congratulations on everything, and looking forward to having another conversation with you in the future.
I really looking forward to that as well, Kevin. Thank you very much.
Okay, man. Thank you again for your time. Have a great evening and take care.
Yeah, you too. Thank you, Kevin. All right.
Okay. Bye.
Ciao. Bye.